Studying for the USMLE without having a schedule from day one is a huge mistake. Many people do. I was one of them, and it also led me to fail step one. You don't have to make the same mistake. In today's video, I would like to help you build your own schedule. And first of all, I would like to start with a demonstration. In the link down below in the description, you will find a page that holds pretty much the summary of what we're discussing today. The different schedules that I recommend to people I work with towards the USMLE. Let's get to it. This is just a demonstration. We're going to go into all the details as the video progresses. So I noticed over time that I can divide the people I help study for the USMLE into one of three groups according to the schedules. And each of every person can be grouped into one of these, for sure. First group is what I call the heaven group. The group that people say, I cleared my entire schedule for this. I don't have any other obligations. I have a month for exam to study for the exam. I have 1.5 months. I have 2 months. So for this group, we have exemplary schedules. For example, the 1 month group and the 1.5 month group. And we'll get to that later on, of course. Second group is the juggling group, the group of people that have another obligation on their hands in their schedule. That can be a part-time job, it can be in family. And of this group, I found people who have afternoons, which are free, or people who have few days a week which are free, and the other days are not free at all. So for example, if the afternoons are free, this is the schedule that we'll discuss. And if they have 3 days a week, so on the free days what you can do, and on work days what you can do in order to study them in the most efficient manner possible. And the third group, which I call the hell group, I was in that group. For example, I work full-time, I have a family, I have no idea how in the world can I make it happen, how can I pass this test, or how can I get to the score that I need in the USMLE. So you might have 2 months until test day. This is the schedule for weekdays and for weekends, and this is the schedule that you have 1.5 months until test day. And we'll get to that later on. So this is just a demonstration of what we're going to discuss during this video. If you already know which group you are in, heaven group, juggling group, or hell group, my condolences, then you can just skip ahead using the chapters down below. It will give you about 80% of what you need. So if you're pressed for time, this is, I think, more than enough to start with. But if you do have time to sit out and to listen to the entire video, I do recommend doing that, because I'm going to provide some tips in the other groups that you might find beneficial. Although you're not like in the heaven group, you're in the hell group, but some of the tips may be of value to you. Okay, so if you like these kind of videos about the USMLE or other doctors and scientists videos, hit the subscribe button or the like button or both. And without further ado, let's get started. So we're gonna start with the heaven group, okay? The group of people who cleared their entire schedule to study for the USMLE. Let me tell you a secret. Some people think that the best group to be in is the heaven group, is the group that have all the time that they need in order to study. But by the end of this video, you will see that this group has many disadvantages, and you might find yourself not studying in the most efficient manner possible. And it's something you need to just bear in mind when you study using this schedule. Also, I saw and I noticed that people in the heaven group tend to score lower than those people who have other obligations on their schedule, and we'll touch on that later on in this video. Okay, so let's start with the principles of how to study if you're in the heaven group, the group of people who have all the time they need to study. It can be 1 month, it can be 1.5 months, but first of all, you need to take your entire time that you have and take the number of questions that you have to practice and do some math to see how many questions you can get a day. So I'm going to use a very popular example. I'm going to use UWorld as an example. UWorld is a resource that you can use in order to study for the exam. I think this is the best one. This is the one that I used before my USMLE Step 1, Step 2, and Step 3. So let's take, for example, if you're studying for step 1 or step 2, you will see that UWorld has between 3,500 and 4,000 practice questions. In my other videos, I discussed on how to use these resources, but now I want to focus on how to build your schedule based on it. First of all, you need to plan your schedule so you'll get to all of UWorld questions. I'm gonna mention UWorld this entire video. If you're using other resources, that's fine. I'm gonna just say UWorld for the sake of simplicity. So you need to get to all of UWorld questions. So for example, if you have 3,600 questions on UWorld and you have a month and a half to study, then you have about 40 or 45 days to study. And you need to divide the number of questions to the number of days. Now, I would leave about a week or a week and a half before exam day. In that week and a half, you shouldn't plan on doing many practice questions. You need to be at the state of you're already done with all or almost all practice questions. So for example, if you have a month and a half before exam day and you have about 30 days to devote to UWorld questions, then you have 3,600 divided by 30, you have 120 questions a day. It means 3 blocks a day that you need to study, okay? How are you going to build your schedule with these 3 blocks? So let's go back to my Notion page in the link down below, and let's open up the month and a half, okay, and the month. You will see that if you want to divide your studying in a manner that you will get to all of your old questions in 1 month, you need to do 3 blocks a day. So this is a schedule. For example, you start in the morning and you start your morning with 40 question block. I do recommend, even for people who are not used to studying in the morning or taking practice tests in the morning, you should do just that. You should practice questions early in the morning, the same time you would take the real test. Even if you're used to study at night, you should practice in the morning because the real test will be in the morning. So start your day, you get up, drink your coffee, do whatever you do, and start your morning by answering a 40 question block. After that, you can take a break for a breakfast, and then you can start preparing your own Anki cards. So let's touch on the part of using the Anki cards. In my other videos, I touched on the point of the advantages of preparing your own Anki cards, and as opposed to using other people's Anki cards. I'm not going to go into that. You can watch my other video to get more information in this regard. But when you study your own Anki cards, your whole studying routine gets much more efficient. Yes, it will take you more time to prepare your Anki cards, but you will learn much more. And if you have all the time devoted throughout the day to study for the USMLE, there is no reason to study from others' people flashcards. Okay, this is why throughout my explanation here and in my schedules and to all the people I recommend how to study for the exam, preparing your own Anki cards is the top priority. Okay, so this is a point I will repeat when I touch on the other groups as well, but this is something to bear in mind because it is very, very, very important. Second point I want to touch on, aside from the blocks and preparing your own Anki cards, is the stress that you need to introduce into your schedule. When you're on test day, you need to work under stress. So you need to get used to it when you're studying for the exam. And one of the disadvantages when you're in the Heaven group, the group that has all the time during the day to study, is that you don't have much stress. Okay, and that can be a huge disadvantage when you come to test day and all of a sudden you are getting stressed. Okay, so during the day, you need to introduce the stress into your studying routine. Now, first of all, you need to decide on deadlines. You need to decide that by that day, like day number 7, day number 14, I need to go through that and that amount of questions in UWorld. And if I only have 1 month, okay, to cover the entire world. It means that 3,600 questions divided by 2, 1,800 questions should be your goal after 2 weeks of studying, okay, halfway through UWorld. And you need to make sure that you finish every single day by completing all the Anki cards that you have, okay? You can't really go to the next day and study the cards or close the gaps from the day before. So you need to put deadlines on your schedule. Now, some people don't get stressed out enough early in their studying. So a good way of doing that is just start by performing a practice test. There is a practice test, for example, you will have few of them. They are composed of 4 chapters, 4 blocks of test, meaning it will take you 4 hours, and then it will give you some estimate of how high can you score on the real test. So if you introduced it early in the study, you might get more stress and more motivation in order to get going. But the lack of stress in the heaven schedule is one of your worst enemies, and it's a very important thing to bear in mind while you study for the exam. Another enemy, a big enemy of your study, especially in the heaven group, is the passive learning. In my other videos, I touched on how to study using Anki cards and the principles of active recall and spaced repetitions. I'm not going to dive deep into that, but there are ways of active learning, spaced repetitions, and active recall, and there are ways of passive learning, such as marking, such as summarizing, such as just reviewing or reading the material or watching movies. These are all passive methods of learning. And if you use passive methods of learning, you won't get the same benefit as the active way of learning. And this is a huge enemy, especially in the heaven group, because on other groups like the hell group don't have time for anything. They won't have time to sit and just watch videos instead of practicing tests, instead of studying their flashcards. But in the heaven group, you have time. You can sit and relax and watch a Pathoma video or watch a sketchy video or use the sketchy cards. So this is a huge enemy you might have with a passive learning. And when we'll get to the schedule that I built for you for the heaven group, you will see where I placed the passive learning. If you must do passive learning, like watching videos, where exactly did I place it inside your schedule in a way that won't cause a lot of damage, okay, to your study. So one enemy we discussed is the lack of stress, and the second one is the passive learning, that you might find yourself wasting time on it. The first time I took step 1 and I failed, I had 2 months. The first month I just sat and read and summarized. I used the first aid, and that was a huge waste of time. And I almost passed the test just by doing the UWorld. 4 weeks, I just got through about half of UWorld because I had other stuff to do in parallel to the USMLE. But the passive learning was a huge enemy of mine, and you shouldn't go down the same route. Don't, okay? And regarding the schedule, the long-term schedule, so we discussed the daily schedule and now the long-term schedule. So if you have a month and a half to study, then I would leave about 4 weeks to cover UWorld, or 4 to 5 weeks to cover UWorld, and I would leave about a week to a week and a half before exam day to review the material, to practice tests, okay? And you should do that around the 1 week mark. I wouldn't complete UWorld earlier than that, okay? Some people want to, especially people in the heaven group who have all the time that they need, they complete UWorld about 3 or 4 weeks before exam day, and then they have all the time in the world to review, to read. But when you use these passive methods and when you're not practicing every single day many blocks of questions, you're losing the touch, you're losing the edge, you're losing your ability to cope with stress. This is why I recommend you leaving about a week and a half before test day to review or to do practice beyond your world, but I wouldn't recommend leaving more than that. Very, very important, especially in the heaven group. Okay. Now, I talked about many disadvantages of being in the heaven group, but there is a huge advantage in the heaven group is that you have time. And you have time to relax. And you have time to sleep. So you need to use that to your advantage, because a huge advantage of many other people in the juggling group and in the hell group, they are more stressed than you. They study more efficiently than you. So if you sit back and relax, and they don't have the time to sit back and relax, you need to make the sit down and relax an advantage, not a disadvantage. So what I recommend, and you will see that in the schedules that I built for you, I recommend introducing sports into your schedule. I recommend introducing naps into your schedule, going to sleep for about 20 minutes or half hour in the middle of the study day. These naps, you will see, will give you a lot of energy, and you will see that you'll remember much more after these naps. For example, you can prepare coffee, drink your coffee, go to sleep immediately after that. I'm talking about afternoon naps, yeah? I'm not talking about night. So 11 a.m., 12 p.m., drink your coffee, take a 20 minutes nap. Then when you get up, the coffee kicks in and you're ready for the second part of the day. I did that while I was studying the hell group. The group of people who don't have time or just use power naps because I was so tired. But if you're in the heaven group, you can use that to your advantage. And research shows that you'll score higher, 10 or 20%. I'm not talking about USMLE, I'm talking about tests in general. You will score 10 to 20% higher if you sleep well. So use that to your advantage. Okay, and we'll get to that even more when we review the schedule itself. So to sum up here, sleep, nutrition, sports are your friends, passive learning and the lack of stress are your enemies in the heaven group. So remember these principles, and let's go back to the Notion page, the link that I shared down below, and let's go back to the heaven group. I cleared my entire schedule for this, and let's start with I have 1 month. So if you have 1 month before exam, I would start your morning with 40 question block. I already touched on that. We're not going to go into more detail right now. Then you can stop, eat breakfast. Right after that, prepare your own Anki cards. Again, I'm not going to go into the why prepare Anki cards and why prepare your own Anki cards. That's a subject of a whole different video. I made, I think, 2 videos on that at least. So you can watch these in order to get more information about why I find it important. Right after completing your Anki cards, notice that I didn't introduce another break here. This is very important, and this is intentional. You need to get used to staying inside the zone of taking tests throughout the morning and even to the early afternoon without taking breaks. Okay, because on real test day, you'll have 7 hours or 8 hours to take the test. Of it, about 7 hours out of the 8 hours will be actual time you're answering questions, and about an hour that you can divide for your breaks. Most people take the first 2 blocks, write one back to back, write one after another. So you're actually answering 80 questions in a row, and then take a short break and then do 1 more block or 2 more blocks. I'm not going to go into that on how to take the test itself. I'm just discussing the principle of preparing yourself to the stress of exam day. So except for the breakfast I introduced here, notice that the lack of breaks after the breakfast is intentional. Okay? You're done to prepare your own Anki cards. Immediately afterwards, you start another block. Okay? And after that, you can take a lunch break. You don't need to prepare your Anki cards immediately after that because I want you to be focused again, okay, to prepare your Anki cards. And right after lunch, and you have enough time for lunch, you can take a nap then if you want. You can eat, you can watch TV. Don't watch Pathoma or Sketchy, okay? Just watch regular TV or do whatever you want. And then we're going back from our lunch break, prepare our own Anki cards, and then we can take a nap. I just noticed for many people this is a very, very difficult hour, 2 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. So the power nap with the coffee I described earlier is an excellent method to keep you energized. Okay, I tried it. Many people I recommended trying this, really enjoy it. So I recommend you try it as well. Next up, we're going to start to study Anki cards. Notice that we didn't study anything, okay, except for preparing the Anki cards and actually answering questions, but we didn't sit down to study the Anki cards. The first time we're going to do that is afternoon because we want to get used to practicing tests during the morning and early afternoon hours, like test day, okay? So after studying Anki cards, you're doing another 40 question block. Notice here as well, there is no break. Okay, this is intentional. You want to study and immediately after that do the 40 question block because you want to start getting used to taking tests when you're not really concentrated in the late afternoon. You are going to take a test at these hours, okay? You're going to take the last block, the last chapter around 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m. on the real test day. So you want to get used to it. Don't make the heaven group be your worst enemy. Okay, remember what I told you in the beginning of this video. So taking the block at this time will be a perfect practice of practicing when you're not concentrated. After that, you can take your evening break for an hour and then you can prepare your own Anki cards and then you can study Anki cards until early evening, or I don't know, some people define it as late evening for studying, define it whatever you want. But this is the schedule for those who have 1 month to cover the entire UWorld question bank. That will give you 3,600 questions in 1 month, give or take. Okay. If you have 1.5 month, the main difference between the two, the 1 month and 1.5 month, is doing, instead of doing 3 blocks a day, you will do just 2 blocks a day. Notice that when I see people who have 1.5 month instead of 1 month, I don't tell them, okay, finish UWorld exactly like the 1 month group, and then you'll have 2 or 3 weeks to review your material. Okay, we don't want that passive methods of learning. Instead of that, you will do 2 blocks a day. You will get used to answering these blocks every single day until almost test day. And this is very, very important. Don't leave this gap at the end without practicing questions. And the principle of your mornings remain the same, okay? You get up 8 a.m. or 9 a.m., you start your first block. You want to you want everything in the state of mind of getting used to the real test. You take a breakfast break, you're in the heaven group, you're allowed to take breakfast, and then you prepare your own Anki cards, and then you take another question block without a break. Very, very important, okay? After that, you can take your lunch break, and after that, you can prepare your own Anki cards and take a nap. And then you can study your Anki cards and do some sports and study Anki cards again. And notice that the principle and the amount of studying is very similar to the 1 month, but it's more spread out. It means that your brains will have more time to let everything sink in, so you'll have better ability to retain the information. Okay, we're not cramming everything in 1 month and then leaving ourselves 3 weeks to do almost nothing. We are preparing in a very similar way to the 1 month group. Now, evening, 7 p.m. more or less, you're free for the rest of the evening. Or bonus, I wrote here bonus, you can use Sketchy, Pathom, or other passive material if you must do it. Then you don't want to waste the real morning hours and afternoon hours, the real hours that you'll take the real test. If you must do the passive things of learning, do them late afternoon or evening. Okay, so this is the heaven group. Surprisingly not the best group to be in, okay, because of your enemies, passive learning, lack of stress. Okay, next up, the juggling group, those people who have other obligations on their hands. So with this group, there are 2 specific subgroups I want to discuss. One of them is a group of people who are working part-time in the morning. Okay, so all their afternoons and possibly weekends are free. And the people who also work or study part-time, but they devote 2 full days or 3 full days a week for their work or their study, and then they have 3 or 4 free days. Okay, so their week is the weekdays are very, very different from each other. So we're going to touch on both of these in the schedule that I'll help you build. But let's start with several principles to understand the logic behind the juggling group and the recommendations I give to the juggling group. First of all, there's something very, very, very important to understand with the juggling group. It's not very different from the heaven group, okay? It's not very different from the heaven group as for the time that you're actually devoting to study. It means that if you're taking the total time that the heaven group people will study and the total time that you should study in the juggling group, that should be pretty much the same. The main difference between you, the juggler, and the people in the heaven group they have all the time in the world to study is that they have time to take breaks and they have time to do things in a more relaxed way, and they have time to do also passive learning materials. Passive learning, I touched on that when I explained in the heaven group. You can touch it there, but in general, passive learning is reading, marking out, watching videos. This is passive learning. This is a huge enemy of the heaven group. So in general, when you're a juggler, it means that you can devote the same amount of time for active learning like the heaven group, but you won't waste time on anything that is not considered very efficient and productive studying. Okay, you won't waste your time. And this is a big difference between the two groups. And in general, I noticed that people in the juggling group have a better chance of scoring higher than the people in the heaven group. This is just the way it is. Okay, and it's not just USMLE. It's not something I noticed just in the USMLE. I noticed it for many years as a teacher in many different types of tests. Okay, so remember that as a juggler and one in the heaven group. Now, you will have to use your time wisely. Okay, you will need to be aware of every minute you devote to the USMLE and every minute you devote to something else. And we'll get to that in the schedules that I'll provide to you. Let's take for examples. So in general, you can use the principle that each block that you practice, when I say block, again, I touched on it in the heaven group, just as a reminder, if you didn't watch that part and you skipped to this part, a block is 40 questions. It takes 60 minutes, okay? I'll use UWorld as an example, but you can use any other resource to practice that pleases you and works for you best. So if you are taking a 40 questions block, it will take you 60 minutes, but you will also need to prepare Anki cards to study the explanations in these questions, and I touch on the how to study and explanation and everything in my other videos. And you will need to sit down and study afterwards, or study or practice the flashcards. In general, you can estimate the time for each block, okay, as 3 hours from taking the block until you're complete with the studying. It will take you about 1 hour to practice, about 1 hour, 1 hour and a quarter, sometimes an hour and a half to prepare the flashcards, and another between half hour to 45 minutes to study the new flashcards that you just prepared. So you need to see that your schedule can fit all this in. So if you need to practice 3,600 questions and each block is comprised of 40 questions, you can do the math. You will have 90 blocks to practice. So you will need 90 times 3, you will need 270 hours of studying total, okay? That includes the practice itself of the questions, the preparation of the Anki cards, and the studying of the flashcards. Now, this math seems very complicated. It's not, and we'll get to the schedules that I built for you in a couple of minutes, but this is the main principle. So if you need to plan ahead and to know when to take the test, this is what you should plan for. Around 3 hours per block, or 270 hours of studying to complete all the questions, prepare the flashcards, and study the flashcards. Okay. Another very, very, very important principle you need to understand if you're in the juggling group is that you must master the methods of spaced repetition and active recall. And I touch on these in my USMLE videos, and also in the video that where I explain how I prepare Anki cards. You need to be proficient in these methods, and you need to use almost only these methods in order to learn. You shouldn't use passive learning. Okay, you shouldn't use passive learning, and you can watch these videos to understand why and how to do that. Now, another advantage that you should use is the actual time you spend at work. The time that you spend at work or at school doing something else is not time that goes to waste with studying. You can take your flashcards with you and use every second that you have in order to study. And if you have 5 seconds, you can study a flashcard in those 5 seconds. And if you have a minute, you can study even 5 or 6 flashcards. It sounds extreme, okay? But it's not that hard to do. And if you have the Anki software, Anki app on your phone or on your tablet or on your computer, you can use this time in between, and you'll be amazed how much studying you can accomplish in between while you're at work. And we'll get to that when I touch on the schedule itself. You need to prioritize. You have to prioritize practicing questions in your world, for example, and preparing flashcards and studying flashcards are your top priority. Okay? Everything that is considered passive learning, watching videos, reading, marking out, you can just get rid of. You don't need to do that. Okay? You don't. You need to prioritize. Now, if you have time somehow to study first aid, the book of the USMLE, go ahead and do that, but not instead of doing the most important things. Practicing questions, all the questions. Preparing your own Anki cards and study your own Anki cards. These are your top priority, especially if you're in the juggling group. Okay, let's touch on the schedules. So we'll go back to the Notion page linked down below in the description. Scroll down, okay, it starts like this, and you can scroll down to the juggling group. There are 2 subgroups here, as I mentioned before. We have my afternoons are free group, and we have I work 3 days a week group. I estimate it as I have 2 months until test day. I just noticed that this is the most common time frame that I saw people starting to study for the USMLE when they have a part-time job or they study something else. So if your afternoons are free, it means you're at work from morning until afternoon, okay? So during that work, you need to study the Anki cards, okay? Use whatever time you have to study the Anki cards, okay? You have to do that. The more you do that, the more vacant your afternoon schedule will be, and the more energized you will feel that you're making progress. So just make use of this time. Then you can take a break when you get home, and you can start by taking the 40 question block. Now, you need to get used to answering questions in the morning because your real test will be in the morning, but this is reality. Reality is your afternoons are free, you don't have mornings free. This is the reality. So you will take the 40 question block at 4 p.m. until 5 p.m. Then you will have an hour and a half to prepare your own Anki cards. Then you can do another 20 question block because doing another 40 questions block is a bit too much, okay, at this point. And if you do 60 questions a day, if you have around 3,600 questions total, it will take you 2 months to finish your world, okay? This is more than reasonable to do. And of course, most people have weekends free and they can use them in order to close the gaps or do it in, make it under 2 months. Okay, but if you have 2 months and you work every single day of the week, even weekends, and you only have afternoons free, this is more than reasonable to do. Then you can take a break, then you can prepare your own Anki cards, and then you only have 1 hour, about 1 hour every night to study Anki cards. You need to sleep well because while you're at work, you need to be as focused as possible, especially, of course, for your work as well, but especially to study the Anki cards themselves. So you need to find a way to cover all the Anki cards while you're at work. I did that, okay? I was a medical intern and I studied the entire Anki cards I prepared for the day and also the Anki cards that I need to review from the past. And when I got home afternoon, my Anki was zeroed out, meaning I didn't have more Anki cards to study for that day. Okay, so this is a huge advantage of using that time. This is in case your afternoons are free and you have 2 months until test day. And let's take, for example, you have 3 days a week that are filled with work. Okay, you're working full time. You're working full days, 3 days a week, and you have 2 months until test day. So let's divide your days into free days and work days. So on your free days, very, very, very similar to the Heaven group. Remember the Heaven group? If you haven't watched the Heaven group part, that's perfectly fine, but this is very similar to their schedule. You get up in the morning, start your morning with a 40 question block. Very, very, very important, okay, on your free days to get up early enough and to start answering questions at the same time you will answer questions on test day. And test day and the real test starts at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. Okay, so you need to get used to it. Don't sleep late. Don't sleep late. You need to get used to taking the questions early in the morning. Then you can take a break for breakfast, and right after that you prepare your own Anki cards. And immediately after that, without any break, you are taking another 40 question block. Okay, very important. I touched on it when I described the other groups, but if you just join me for this chapter, then the principle here that you want to get used to not taking too many breaks during morning, because you won't have the opportunity to take too many breaks on test day, especially in the morning. Okay, so this is why there is no break here. This is intentional. And then you can take your lunch break, take a long lunch, 1 hour and a half, then you can prepare your own Anki cards, and then you can take a nap. You'll be pretty exhausted by this time because it seems easy to take 2 blocks of 40 questions, but actually it's very difficult to do. Take a nap. You can drink coffee immediately before the nap, like I mentioned before. Go to sleep for 20 minutes, get up, and then you'll feel more energized and you'll use the sleep to your advantage. Okay? It's very, very important to find a way to get enough sleep, especially when you're studying. And if you can squeeze in sleep in the middle of the day, this nap, that will boost your score. And this is evidence-based. Okay, right after the nap, you can study the Anki cards for about 1 hour and a half, and then you can do a shorter question block because you don't need to complete the entire question block on free days. You also want to practice something on work days, and I'll touch on that momentarily. And then you can prepare your own Anki cards for that block, and then you can take another break and study Anki cards in the late evening. This is your free day or free day from work. Now on work days, you need to use the time at work. So I define it as 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. as your full work day, but you can of course adjust it according to your real schedule. But you need to squeeze in the studying of flashcards throughout the day, okay? Any work will allow you to take 10 seconds to review flashcards. You'll be amazed with how many times a day you can find a minute, 10 minutes, or even half hour, okay, to study. Use that, and the flashcard system is perfect for that. Then you can take a break right after you get home, and then you can take a 40 question block. Now, this is not completely representative of test day, because test day is not during evening hours, but getting used to taking a block when you're not completely in focus is a very good practice. before test day. This is why I recommend you doing 40 question block and then preparing your own Anki cards right afterwards. And then your cards will be ready for your next work day or your next free day. Okay, so this was the juggling group. And that brings us to our last group, which is the hell group. The hell group. So the hell group is of people who work full time, meaning they have no idea how are they going to squeeze it in. So I was in that hell group. Most of the tests that I took, step 1, step 2, and step 3, most of the time I was in that group. I didn't have time to study. I just found a way to squeeze it in. Now, I wasn't successful on my first try. My first try, I took step 1. I had 2 months. I wasted the first months on passive learning. I just sat and read First Aid, the book, and watched Pathoma videos and just wasted this month. When I got to the last 4 weeks before exam day, then I started to practice Your World. I didn't get through the entire Your World question bank, and I got to the test. I almost passed. Okay, I didn't believe that I almost passed, but I failed. Okay, if I would go back in time, of course, if I would just start with active recall, preparing flashcards, whatever I described in this video, I would have passed this test for sure. If someone would have prepared this video when I took the test, I would just pass the test. So, hell group. First of all, okay, I've been there. Again, I thought it was impossible, but it was possible. Okay, and I want you to remember this sentence. It is possible. Okay? No matter how exactly you are going to do it, studying for the USMLE under the so-called impossible conditions will make you stronger as a person. Okay? It will prepare you better for the tests you'll have later down the road, and it will just make you a stronger person. You'll have a better ability to withstand stress and to find ways to do what the so-called impossible. Okay? The fact that I failed step 1 was one of the most important experiences of my adulthood, and I wouldn't change a thing. Okay? So just remember that, because the studying is going to be difficult. Your morale is going to be low. I had no one to give me advice. You can listen and watch my other videos to understand why was that state. I studied in a whole different manner. I took med school after dental school because I'm an oral maxillofacial surgeon, so I didn't have friends from med school to recommend me about the USMLE. It was very different, so I just did it on my own. Just remember what I'm telling you, and you can just go back to this video to listen to it again and watch it again. It is possible, and you need to keep going. Okay, so this is the main take-home message I want to start with. Okay, so how are you going to do this? How are you going to do this? So first of all, spaced repetition and active recall are your companions for the next month and a half, or 2 months. You have to use active recall and spaced repetitions to your advantage. And I prepared a whole separate videos on that subject. You can go ahead and watch that. I will link them down below. But this is the only way to study. You can't waste your time on passive learning. You can't sit down and read material. You can't sit down and watch movies, okay? You have to practice questions. You have to make mistakes. You have to prepare your own flashcards, and you have to study those flashcards and zero them every single day, meaning no more flashcards are left. You need to use your time wisely, okay? Active recall, spaced repetition are the only way to go. I wish someone would have told me that before I took step 1 for the first time. Okay, remember that. Throughout your study, it's going to be difficult. Okay. Now, you have, even when you look on your schedule, it's impossible schedule. Even that impossible schedule has 3 types of time frames in it. The first one is an uninterrupted time. You'll have uninterrupted time. We'll get to the schedule, we'll see how we can get that uninterrupted time. But you'll have time that you can sit down, no one is going to disturb you. Okay, this is the first time. This is the first type of time. The second type of time frame is the interrupted but still usable time. Okay, interrupted but still usable time. And the third time frame is time that you don't have to study, but you can sacrifice, okay, other things in order to study. Let's touch on these three different time frames. First one is uninterrupted time. You need to find time that you won't be interrupted. And oftentimes this is very early in the morning and very late in the day. This is uninterrupted time. If you have a way of carving out, finding more uninterrupted time, that's perfect, but you need to utilize the early morning hours and the late evening and night hours. This is an uninterrupted time. The second type of time, the interrupted but still usable, is the time, for example, you're at work. Okay, so they will interrupt you. Okay, of course, this is your work, but they will interrupt you, or you're at school. So you're at the lecture or you need to do something related to the school, but you can still use that time. So whenever I had time to study, my phone had the Anki software, the Anki flashcard software. I had my iPad mini always with me in my pocket. I had my laptop sometimes. And whenever I had time, I just took out my phone or took out my iPad and started studying, even if it were 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 1 minute here and there. If I'm at a lecture, and in a lecture you have the more boring moments or the moments that you actually wait for something to start, you can use that time to study. If it's a lecture that you have to attend but you don't really need to listen, just sit there and study. Find the time that is interrupted. You won't be as focused as the uninterrupted time, but use that to study the flashcards. I don't recommend you planning on practicing questions at that time because you won't be focused enough and you won't have the ability to take everything that you can from each question and learn from it. So I would just plan on perhaps preparing flashcards and mainly studying flashcards in that interrupted but still usable time. Third type of time is the sacrifice time, the time that you can sacrifice and get something in return. Now, it can be something in your workplace. You can just ask for a day off. You know it will be frowned upon. You know that you won't feel very comfortable to take that day off, but just think, what do you prefer? You prefer not feeling very comfortable asking for a day off, or you prefer to fail the test? Okay, so just find a way to make these small sacrifices. For those of you with family, try to see if your significant other can help more. You won't feel very comfortable asking that after they sacrifice so much for you, okay, until that point, especially for medical students and medical professionals. This is just the way it is. Try to see when and where you can sacrifice family time, work time, whatever you can in that limited time frame in order to get what you need from that test. Because the alternative is that you will fail the test or not score the same score that you need to score in order to get accepted to whatever program you want to get accepted to. And then you will have to take the test again. And then they will have to withstand the situation of you not there again for a couple of months. And it will be more stressful because then you already failed the test and you need to take it again. And you'll be more stressed out from the possibility of failing because you actually failed once. Okay? Find a way to make these small sacrifices because each one of them may be the sacrifice that will just push you over the threshold that you need to pass, okay, or get the grade that you need. So try to do that. I know it's difficult, but you'll need to find that balance. Okay. Let's go now to the schedule. In the HELL group, this is the most difficult group, and I studied, again, step 1, step 2, step 3. I was in that group. Now, you must trust investing time in reading the explanations. Okay, when you practice your world, you answer the question, you got it right or you got it wrong, then you need to read the explanations. Even if you're at the hell group, you don't have time for anything, okay? You need to take the time and read the explanations from start to finish. And if there is a principle in another answer that was the wrong answer, the answer that you didn't pick, and it's almost irrelevant to this question, there's still a principle behind it. You want to study that principle right now in that question. Don't wait for the principle to appear on a separate question. And you need to prepare an Anki card for that principle as well. And I touch on Anki cards and how to study, etc., in my other videos. You can watch that in order to get more details. But the fact that you don't have time shouldn't discourage you from reading the entire explanation. Okay, and shouldn't discourage you from preparing your own Anki cards, and shouldn't discourage you from engaging in active recall and spaced repetitions as the only studying methods. Okay, don't go and just sit down and read or watch a movie, a Pathomo movie, for example, instead of doing the active recall. Okay, it's very easy to fall in this trap when you're in the hell group. Okay, especially. So this is a very, very, very important part. Second thing I want to mention before we get to the schedule is that when you're practicing in this manner and you read the explanation, it will take forever to read the explanations and you take forever to prepare the Anki cards. You won't see the results until you're almost 2/3 through your world. It means that you will have to do at least half of your world before you see any benefit of what you did so far. And you shouldn't let that discourage you. You need to continue answering the blocks, reading the explanations, preparing flashcards to the whole explanation, also for the answers that are irrelevant right now, and study them. You will start to see the results only after about 60 or 70% of your world that you completed. Remember that. No one told me that when I practiced for the test. I was discouraged. I didn't see any benefit of what I'm doing. Remember what I'm telling you right now. You will see the benefit, but you will see it only when getting to the 60 or 70% of your world done. Okay, very, very important to remember. Okay, so let's touch on the schedule right now. Back to the Notion page, the link down below. You can click it, Hell Group. Yeah, that's the name. I work full-time. Okay, let's take the first example. You have 2 months until test day, and the second example will be 1.5 months until test day. We'll start with the 2 months. So if you have 2 months, you need to separate between the weekdays and weekends. So I'm basing the schedule on the fact that you will have the opportunity to have a bit more time during weekends, okay? Now, your other obligations can be work, family, or both. I use these as examples here, but you can change it to whatever suits you best, but the principles are the same. Let's start with weekdays. Weekdays. Yes, this is not a mistake. 5:30 in the morning. 5:30 in the morning to 6:30, start with a 40-question block. You need to carve out time. There is no other way. Okay, when you're the hell group, you need to carve out time. You need to get up really early and finish the first block of 40 questions. Immediately after that, you can prepare your own Anki cards. What it means is that by 8 a.m., you already have 40 questions in and Anki cards. Okay, and this is morally and for your ability to retain the information morally and for retaining information, it's a huge advantage to finish it off before you actually start to work. You start the day and the stress level is decreased substantially. And now you have Anki cards already prepared and you can use your workday to study these flashcards, meaning throughout your workday, find a way to study the flashcards. Your goal is to get home by 5 p.m. and have Anki zeroed out, No more flashcards to study until that point. Okay? Now you're at home. Between 5 and 8, do whatever you need to do with your other obligations with work, or spend time with your family. Okay? After that, 8 p.m., you're going to study. You're not going to go through a 40 question block. It might be too difficult, and you have 2 months until test day, and you have the weekends. So I recommend doing another 20 question block and not 40 questions. And then you'll have enough time to prepare your own Anki cards and try to study Anki cards until you can't do it anymore. Some people just prefer to go to bed. 9:30, 10, they're exhausted, they're getting up really early in the morning because Shai told you start to practice a block at 5:30 a.m. So see if you can or need to study the flashcards. But if you find a way to be very productive with your flashcards starting at work, you won't need to study late in the evening. And during work, you can remember. So if I'm not studying my flashcards right now, I'll have to study them at 8 p.m. and I want to go to bed at 8 p.m. Okay? So this is what your weekdays look like. And 60 questions a day, this is pretty substantial. Okay? Now, weekends. This is not a mistake. 5:30 on weekends, you get up and 40 question block. And then you prepare your own Anki cards. By 8 a.m., weekend. It's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever your weekend is. It's 8 a.m. Your family is getting up in the morning. I know small kids get up earlier than that. And you're already done with 40 question block and your own Anki cards. So if you need to work now on weekends, or if you want to spend time with your family, you can do that until noon. And then at noon, you're taking a break from your work or telling your family you're going away for a half hour. And then you take a 20 question block. And if you can, carve out another hour on the weekend, you can prepare your own Anki cards and go back to your family or to your work on weekend. Again, I'm talking about extreme schedules here. Okay? So by 6 p.m. on weekend, you completed 60 questions, you're all done preparing the Anki cards, and you spend time with your family. Now, if you can, 6 p.m., go aside and study your Anki cards. Of course, this is extreme. Some of you may say, no, it's okay. I can study flashcards on the weekend. I can practice more blocks on the weekend. I don't have to take 4 hours in the middle of the day to my family. That's great, okay? But if you don't have the time, if you're at the extreme, this is what you need to do. Last thing, 1.5 months until test day. So if you're more pressed for time, then starting the day, same way, 5:30 to 6:30 with the 40 question block. Prepare your Anki cards. You study your Anki cards at work. You have family time between 5 and 6 p.m. Then, instead of doing the 20 question block you did if you had 2 months until exam day, now you have to do 40 question block. And that's fine. That's not an extreme change compared to what you did before. And then you prepare your Anki cards and study Anki cards until you can't anymore. So the difference between 1.5 months and 2 months is not that extreme. Mainly, instead of 20 questions, you're doing the 40 question block later in the day. On weekends, you can do, again, the 40 question block, family time, 20 question block, pretty similar to what we had as compared to the 2 months, okay? Actually, it's the exact same schedule. Of course, you can tweak it, you can change it here and there, but you see the principles. Of course, if you don't have to get up at 5:30 in the morning, that's perfect, okay? But if you just can't, if you're in the hell group, you don't have any other way of doing it, and you need to get up and make it happen, okay? So this is the hell group. Passive learning is your greatest enemy. Don't sit down and watch movies, read books. Don't do it. Anki cards, space repetitions, year-old, reading the explanations, the entire explanations. preparing flashcards from each one of the relevant answers, even those you got wrong and are not relevant to the question. You need to prepare Anki cards from all of them. These are the principles that will serve as your friends. And it's very, very, very important to remember that. Spreading the studying of the flashcards is one of your huge advantages in the Hell group. The fact that you are studying your flashcards at work because you have to study your flashcards at work is a huge advantage. Instead of trying to sit down for a full hour and just studying a flashcard after flashcard after flashcard, you're at work. You can study 2 flashcards and go about your business. 1 hour afterwards, you can sit down and study 10 flashcards, and then you leave it at that. But between that time of the 2 flashcards and the 10 flashcards, your brain continues to work on this information. So the fact that during workday you can spread your studying, you can spread your spaced repetition is a huge advantage, enormous advantage. And this advantage is the most extreme and the most substantial in the Hell group. So use that to your own advantage. Use your disadvantage of work or other obligations in order to accomplish what you need. Remember that. I had no one to tell me that, but I'm telling you that right now, and it will work for sure. And with that, we'll end today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Link down below for all the schedules. Click the like button if you like these type of videos, and subscribe because it helps to support the channel. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.